In the early morning of 1921, what drifted over Tambov wasn't mist from the forest. It was chlorine gas. Hundreds of military canisters were unleashed, not against foreign invaders on a battlefield, but against starving peasants fighting to survive. Half a century later, in the Kremlin, Mikhail Gorbachev put his name to the document that dissolved the Soviet Union. A superpower like that, born in injustice and ended in disgrace. Late 1920, Moscow. The Bolsheviks had just won the Civil War. On state newspapers, every page burned with triumph. Heroic soldiers at the front, and the glorious victory of proletarian dictatorship. The whole country seemed to be racing toward a promised utopia, a world without exploitation. But behind that vision was a different reality. To feed the war machine, to keep the cities alive, the Soviet regime enforced grain requisition across the countryside. Less than 500 kilometers from Moscow, in Tambov province, armed squads swept into villages like swarms of locusts. They took everything the food peasants needed to survive the winter, gone. The seeds meant for next spring's planting, gone. On one side, in Moscow, leaders stood over maps, sketching grand blueprints of industrialization. On the other side, in Tambov, peasants starved on the edge of collapse. And when they realized the truth that obedience meant death by starvation, they rose. Led by Alexander Antonov, tens of thousands of peasants took up whatever they had. Pitchforks and hunting rifles. They ignited a rebellion that would shake the Soviet state to its core, the Tambov Uprising. In the eyes of the leadership, it was the urban working class and the armed Red Army that formed the regime's true base, while the peasants, scattered, unorganized, despite being the vast majority, were treated as nothing more than expendable fuel for industrialization, to be drained, discarded, and forgotten. When the peasants of Tambov rose up just to survive, the response was not reflection, but fury. Because this was seen not as desperation, but as a direct defiance to absolute authority. To admit that grain requisition had driven them to rebellion would be to admit that one of the regime's central policies was fundamentally flawed. And for a regime that survived on the illusion of perpetual victory, admitting the truth was never an option, because it would expose not just failure, but the lie at the heart of its power. To crush peasants whose only demand was to eat, Mikhail Tukhachevsky, Lenin's loyal enforcer, turned the plains and forests into a machine for killing civilians. In June 1921, poison gas was authorized. And the gas didn't come alone. Behind it came the camps. When the army couldn't find the rebels, they took their families instead. If the rebels didn't surrender, the hostages were executed in front of the entire village. Elderly men with white hair, unarmed women, children choking in gas, cut down by gunfire. Many of these peasants had once helped the Red Army itself. Now, they were given no trial, no voice, no chance to defend themselves. They were uprooted like weeds, erased, as if their lives meant nothing at all. Power doesn't just wield the gun, it controls the narrative. For decades, the Soviet state didn't just hide Tambov, it rewrote it. The dead were given no sympathy, no justice, only a label. Counter-revolutionary. Innocent peasants turned into enemies. Victims turned into vermin that had to be eliminated. To Lenin's most faithful disciples, these people ceased to be human. They became nothing but a disease the regime claimed to have cured on its path to power.